After months and months of planning, when June came, the animals were all ready and they had their plans and they knew exactly what they were going to do. Of course, at a Saturday night, Mr. Jones went out and he got so drunk he was partying at the bar. He was just living his life. He didn't come back until like midday on Sunday, and the men that worked with him at the farm just milked the cow in the early morning, but they gone out to rabbit hunt and they didn't even bother to feed the rest of the animals. Of course, Mr. Jones came back and he immediately went to sleep on the couch and he was just watching the news without a care in the world that his animals were starving. So the animals, they were fed up and they couldn't stand it anymore. That's when they decided they are going to act. One of the cows broke the door of the shed and they all just kept making so much noise, breaking everything. And of course, Mr. Jones woke up. He was so irritated. He got up with the gun in his hand and he was ready to shoot whatever animal that came in his way. Of course, all the animals attacked him, and his other men. They were bitten, attacked, scratched, and kicked all around until they were so scared they fled the farm and they just ran so far away so they wouldn't die. They thought the animals have just gone savage and they were going to kill them, which that should have happened, but I guess the animals were just a little bit weaker than Mr. Jones and the gun. They all were frightened, and all the men, even Mr. Jones himself, went and fled away. He was expelled, and officially Manor Farm was theirs. After that, the animals just began celebrating. They all started singing The Beasts of England 7 times, just living their life and without a care in the world. They were so happy they finally got out Mr. Jones from the farm, and they just sat together and they began to take down the sign that said Manor Farm and they completely changed it to Animal Farm.
Oh my god! Wow!
After their sweet victory, the animals decided to just set the rules that old Major told them about. They decided to respect it in his honor and set down the 7 rules he told them. They said they would form an unalterable law which by all animals on the animal farm must live forever after, and they all must follow it. So there are the 7 commandments. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal. All animals are equal. Now, I want you to pay attention to this very, very well, because that unalterable law is going to have a huge change, and it would affect every single life of an animal on that farm. And after the rules were set and memorized, the sheep had a hard time to understand them because the sheep were the lowest, basically the dumbest creatures in the farm, and they couldn't read, they couldn't understand anything. So Snowball made it just simple as that to them. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and that was it. After that, they noticed that something was missing. The farm's name was changed from Manor Farm to Animal Farm, and they decided, hell, maybe we should have a flag. They took off the old green tablecloth of Mr. Jones's and they painted on it a hoof and a horn in white. Basically, the green baize represents the green fields of England, while the hoof and horn signifies the future republic of animals, which would arise when the human race had been officially overthrown and just out of the way. Shortly after the victory, the animals noticed something real fishy going on in the farm. The first thing was when Jessie and Bluebell the dogs just gave birth to 9 puppies. Just as soon as they were born, Napoleon took them away from their mothers, and he said that he would make himself responsible for their education and that education was just very important for the youngs. He even took them up into a loft in the attic, and he could only be reached by a ladder, which is like, hold on, stop right there. If that attic can be only reached by a ladder, wouldn't Napoleon have to go on his hind legs? Wouldn't Napoleon have to go on 2 legs? Which is agreed, whatever goes up on 2 legs is an enemy, and whatever goes up on 4 legs or has wings is a friend. So why is he on two legs? And why did you take the dogs? Because he certainly was not educating them. No spoilers. The second idea, or basically the second red flag that was happening, was the mystery of where the milk and apples went. But it was soon cleared up. The animals had noticed for a few months, maybe, that the milk and apple harvest was just not there anymore. It was basically vanishing. As soon as the cows were milked and the apple trees were harvested, the other animals never had any of that milk or any ate of those apples. So turns out it was mixed every day into the pig's mash. And the apples were just ripe and they were just eating pickled apples and they were living their best life, which made the animals confused because they assumed that these will be shared out equally. And when they asked, of course, Squealer had an excuse for everything. He got up and, of course, comrades, comrades, you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs have any spirit of selfishness and privilege. Many of us actually dislike the apples. I dislike them myself, even the milk too. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. Okay, that is not disturbing. That is not fishy at all. And of course, he keeps saying his famous line, we pigs are brain workers. It is for your sake that we drink that milk and eat those apples. Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? خد بالك بقى. خد بالك المانيبيوليشن. خد بالك. Jones would come back. Yes, Jones would come back for sure. Surely, comrades, there is none among you who wants to see Jones back, right? By the late summer, the news of what had happened on Animal Farm had finally spread across basically half the country. Every day, Snowball and Napoleon would send out flights of pigeons with instructions. So they were told to go to the neighboring farms and tell the animals the story of the rebellion and teach them the tune of Beasts of England. Of course, at that time, Mr. Jones was spending most of his days at Willingdon. He was complaining to everyone who would listen to him for the monstrous injustice that he suffered because he was kicked out by his animals from his farm. And he kept saying that they were just some good for nothing animals that savagely kicked him out of his own farm. The other farmers were also afraid for another rebellion to happen, so they were basically afraid their animals would take notice of their cruelty and neglect, and they just kind of were frightened that their animals would rebel against them too. So they all put their hands in Mr. Jones and they all agreed to bring back the farm. However, Snowball, the smartest pig of them all, was definitely one step ahead. Now, obviously, the farmers had been planning for their attack for a very long time, and this here, what we'll be talking about soon, is called the Cowshed Battle. So, how it started basically early in October, Mr. Jones and all his men, with basically half a dozen of other farmers from Foxwood and Pinchfield, entered the five-barreled gate and they were coming up to the farm. They were all carrying sticks, except Mr. Jones, who was marching ahead with a gun in his hands. Of course, Snowball was the smartest pig. He was studying an old book from Julius Caesar's campaign. He had found it in the farmhouse. So basically, because he was studying everything so well and he knew how to read perfectly, he was in charge of the defense operations and he gave his orders quickly to the animals, and within a couple of minutes, every animal was in his spot and they were ready to act. Of course, Snowball launched his first attack. All the pigeons and basically a number 235 flew over to the men's and they pecked their heads and hurt them real bad. And it was just an amazing fight. Seeing the humans fail once again to the animals was just very, very awesome in the book, especially after the first rebellion. It was insane. Of course, the battle ended once again with the victory of the animals and the defeat of the cruel mankind. Even though many, many animals were hurt, especially Snowball, he was shot in his neck, yet he did keep fighting, and they did win their sweet, sweet victory once again. Basically, Snowball's role in Cowshed was very important because he did all the studies. He basically planned every single thing. Like as I said, he was studying a book of Julius Caesar's campaign and he was in charge of the defensive operations. He just planned everything perfectly. So after that, if I see anyone in this book trying to take credit for what Snowball did, I'm going to flip. Seriously, because what he did was immaculate, and I don't think any of the other animals could have gone past what Snowball did, because Snowball just is my favorite character. He's smart, he's good at speeches, he's just the best. He is the best. So there's a quick note I want to add here, the huge difference between Napoleon and Snowball. Of course, it was agreed by the majority that the pigs were the smartest animals on the farm. However, their relationship, especially Napoleon and Snowball, was never on the same page. These two literally disagreed on every point where disagreement was possible. Even though Snowball would win the majority of agreements by his brilliant speeches, Napoleon would only support himself and he would canvass support for himself between time. Especially he was successful with the sheep. As I've said before, the sheep are the stupidest animals on the farm and they just hardly memorized four legs good, two legs bad, and that was it. So anything Napoleon says, they just bleat with him. They totally get it. They totally understand, and we support you. Yeah, let's go, go Napoleon. But they really don't understand anything at all. So there was a decision that basically split the farm onto two sides. The windmill. Snowball wanted to build a windmill. He declared it would be a good thing for the farm. It would operate a dynamo and supply the farm with electrical power, which would light the stalls, make them warm in winter. And he also wanted to run a circular saw, a chaff cutter, a mango slicer, and a lot of things. He wanted to basically put the load on the windmill so the animals wouldn't do so much labor and they can like only work 3 days a week, and that was it. He just wanted more, basically, more rest for the animals. He wanted them to not work as hard as they did in Mr. Jones' time. He thought the windmill would be such a great idea to keep the animals working not so much, but they would also have their crops harvested, and it would be a nice add to the farm. Napoleon, on the other hand, saw no good in the windmill idea. He argued that the great need in the moment was to basically increase the food production because if they wasted time on the windmill, they would all starve to death. Which was just not true because if he just gave Snowball a chance, if he would just give Snowball a chance, man, the world would have been so much better. However, after that, this is one of the red flags of Napoleon that I realized the first thing was basically the first red flag thing he did. Napoleon obviously showed zero interest and actually kept denying Snowball's plans, of course, and one night he went to the farmhouse and just took a quick look at Snowball's ideas and all the planning. Snowball would take a chalkboard and he would write all over the wooden floor. So he just looked at them, studied them real hard, and he just lifted his leg and urinated all over the plants, basically washing them out, which is just gross, disgusting, and he obviously left without uttering a word. So yeah, basically that's what it's like to have a pig have the upper hand on you or rule you.
FBI, open up!
Okay, anyways, back to the story. Apart from the disputes over the windmill, of course, Napoleon and Squealer and Snowball decided to have a discussion at Sunday at the farmhouse. So they all sat together, and Snowball kept explaining how the windmill is very important and it would lay off so much work on them and they wouldn't do as much labor and all that stuff. Napoleon, on the other hand, he just stood up to reply. He said very quietly that the windmill was nonsense and he advised nobody to vote for it. And he just sat down again and he barely spoken for like 30 seconds or something. Of course, the disagreements rose again and they all kept yelling and the sheep kept bleating. Four legs good, two legs bad. So Napoleon just stood up once again and he casted a weird, concerning, basically he uttered a high-pitched whimper, a kind that no one ever heard him say before. So the animals just froze confused because what was going on. After that, nine enormous dogs broke into the farmhouse aiming straight for Snowball.
What?
The poor pig, he jolted up from his place to escape their snapping jaws. Animals stood frightened as they just watched Snowball run away terrified, and he was never seen again. After that, the dogs came back, and it was clear that they were the 9 puppies Napoleon had stolen from their mothers, and he promised to educate them. They just sat next to Napoleon because technically he was their owner, and they just kept wagging their tails left and right. Afterwards, Squealer, Napoleon's minion, began to yap again. He told them that Comrade Napoleon was taking extra labor on himself to protect the farm, and blah blah blah. He said also the farm animals will make wrong decisions if they didn't have anyone to instruct them. That's why Comrade Napoleon will be in charge of course, everything. And obviously, without debate, they didn't even dare to utter a word. When someone tried to disagree, there were 4 pigs at that time. They just expressed their disagreement and they were scared. The dogs, they just growled on them and they all just sat in silence. And of course, Squealer had to add his famous line, "Surely, comrades, you don't want Mr. Jones back now, do you?" It's pathetic. It's sad. I feel bad for them for having to actually deal with those pigs all of their lives. After all that mess, Napoleon in fact agreed to build the windmill. He claimed that it was his idea after all, and Snowball stole it from him, and he was a dangerous character and a bad influence to all the other animals. He didn't even give them a legitimate reason why he changed his mind, but all he said that the windmill needed very hard work, meaning it was necessary to reduce their meals. Now, back up here, Buckaroo. What are you talking about? Snowball wanted to build the windmill so it would reduce labor and it would collect harvest more easily, and the animals would only work 3 days a week and they would still have enough to eat, enough to drink, and they were just not going to be working machines all the time. Now, Napoleon wants to build it, but he's gonna have to double, maybe triple the work on the animals and reduce their meals. Are you for real right now? Is this what we're dealing with here? Because I swear this sounds very, very familiar. And obviously, there was never a disagreement. Of course, if anybody dared to disagree, the dogs would growl at them, and of course, you surely don't want Mr. Jones to come back now, comrades, do you?
وبكده يكون معاكم أول بارت من The Animal Farm Series. أتمنى يا رب يكون عجبكم. أنا حبيت أتكلم معاكم عادي. ده كان أول بارت من chapter 1 لحد chapter 6. أتمنى يا رب يكون الفيديو عجبكم. أنا أسفة على التطويل، نص ساعة كتير قوي أنا عارفة، بس فعلا النوفل فيها تفاصيل كتيرة جدا محتاجة تتقال، وفيها ريد فلاجز كتيرة قوي، حتى في تفاصيل كتيرة قوي انا مقلتهاش في الفيديو، بس هحاول اسيب PDF النوفل في الديسكريبشن بوكس او الكومنتس. اتمنى تكون القصة عجبتكم او شدت اي حد ان هو يقراها. اسفة لو طولت عليكم، وطبعا اسفين على الباك جراوند نويز والستutering. الانكزايتي is eating me alive. I really hope you enjoyed this video. This was Maram from the MJ's talk show. Stay tuned and I'll see you next time.